Hey everybody, welcome to my first fiscal policy video. In this one I just outline what fiscal policy is and the difference between expansionary and contractionary and what part of the business cycle you'd want to do each of those. First of all, what is fiscal policy? It is when we change government purchases or taxes to reach our macroeconomic goals. So we're going to change government spending and taxes. How do we do this? Or how does this affect our macroeconomic goals? Well, our aggregate demand is C plus I plus G plus net exports. There's a very direct effect through G. If you change G, you can change aggregate demand. Changing government purchases will directly move it. So let's draw an aggregate demand curve. If G goes up, aggregate demand goes up. That would be a shift to the right. ADB for blue. If government spending goes down, aggregate demand goes down. That would be a shift to the left, ADR for red. So the government side is really straightforward. The tax side's a little less so, but it's still pretty direct. If you want to decrease aggregate demand, you could raise your taxes. Well, raising taxes can affect both consumption and income. For people, if you raise taxes, they have less disposable income. For businesses, if you tax them, they have less profits laying around. In either case, they will have less for consumption and investment. Raising taxes will decrease aggregate demand, shifting us left. Likewise, if you want to decrease taxes, consumption and investment will both rise, and aggregate demand will rise. So there's most of the mechanics of it. It's pretty straightforward in that sense. Let's talk about expansionary versus contractionary policies for a minute. Same ideas as before. Expansionary policies increase aggregate demand, shifting it to the right. Government increase, taxes decrease. Back in monetary policy, we'd say increasing the money supply. The way we'll draw that will be the same here as there, even though monetary policy is different from fiscal policy. But expansionary policy for monetary policy increases aggregate demand. Expansionary policy for fiscal policy increases aggregate demand. And then contractionary policies are just the reverse. They decrease aggregate demand. Cut government spending, raise taxes. The monetary policy equivalent is to decrease the money supply. There you go. So when should you do each kind? Well, that goes back to the stabilization idea. That's our default goal in short-term macroeconomics. We want our current GDP, Y star, to equal our potential GDP, Y bar. So if we were to look at a business cycle, here's Y bar growing over time. There's our business cycle, Y star. And that's if we have no policy. What we'd like to see is for that business cycle to be stabilized. Maybe our policy could make it look like this instead. That would be a much better situation, more stable. There's less of a swing. We're closer to Y bar. A perfect policy would just let us stay on Y bar, and that would be the ideal scenario. We could just ride our growth forever into the future without any sort of crazy swings. So what we're trying to do is, if we're over here where Y star is greater than Y bar, we're trying to decrease GDP to get down to Y bar. If we're over here where Y star is less than Y bar, we're trying to increase GDP, getting up to Y bar. We're trying to stabilize. Same goal as with monetary policy. We want to minimize our cycle. So let's start with this situation, an inflationary gap. Y star greater than Y bar. Well, we're trying to decrease Y star. So this is like over here on the right, on the left in red. What's that going to mean? We want contractionary policy. Cut government spending, raise taxes, something like that, decreases aggregate demand. Our Y star will decrease then to be at the same place as Y bar. In an inflationary gap, we will actually try to slow the economy down and decrease GDP. That will help stabilize it. And we can do the similar idea for the recessionary gap. This is for points over here, where Y star is less than Y bar. That's going to make us want expansionary policy, which is raising government spending or cutting taxes. increasing aggregate demand, and getting our Y star over to Y bar. So that's probably like half the chapter right there, is just understanding that part. Understanding the mechanics of how it works. Some videos I'm going to do next, I'm going to talk about automatic stabilizers. I'm going to talk about deficits, surplus, and debt, because obviously this is going to be important. We're talking about taxing and spending. That means we're going to be talking about how much money the government spends and borrows, etc. I'm going to talk about multiplier effects, and I'm going to also show this in a more dynamic model. And then after this fiscal policy series, I'll probably do a video or two comparing fiscal and monetary policy. And then I think this semester is pretty much over if you're in my class. So we'll see. But anyway, thanks for watching, guys. I hope it was helpful. If not, too bad. Thanks anyway. See you all later.